Most people think the expensive decisions in life are obvious: buying the wrong house, making a bad investment, choosing the wrong job. But some of the most expensive decisions you will ever make don't feel expensive in the moment. They feel comfortable. Comfortable to stay where you are, comfortable to avoid the hard conversation, comfortable to skip the risk, skip the workout, skip the uncomfortable next step. And that's what makes comfort so dangerous, because comfort doesn't send you a bill today, it sends you a bill 5 years from now. So today, on a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast, we're going to break down the true cost of comfort and why so many people unknowingly trade long-term growth for short-term ease. Along with my co-host Ben, let's jump into a brand new episode. Ben, what's going on?
Let's jump into it. This is a conversation that needs to be had. When I think about my own life, there's so many times where I've gotten into my comfort zone and I haven't wanted to get out of it. And it's something you have to be very aware of. Um, are there areas in your life over the years where you've kind of, acknowledged that, or, it's not always what I've realized with the comfort is you don't always realize it right away. But even like your routine or your mindset or how you're living your day to day, it can kind of, routines are important, but you can settle into this kind of just routine, and maybe you're not challenging yourself as much as you were. Maybe you're not pushing yourself in certain areas.
Yeah, I think maybe a way to look at this, kind of what you're saying, and then maybe this isn't what you're saying, but what comes to mind when I hear you say that is, you can be very intentional. You can have a very structured routine. You can have a
hmm
very great, for example, morning routine or whatever it may be. But like as an example, we go to the gym every morning.
Yeah.
But, and I'll be the first to say this, and I'm sure you would agree too, there's days where we kind of just are comfortable. We just kind of go through the motions, but don't really push it or give it 100%. And that's true to really a lot of areas of life. Even if you are doing what you need to do, there's even a level past that when it comes to just the effort. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of comfort, is just like the level of effort that's put forth to really, see change and make progress.
Yeah, that's why I always look at wake-up calls as gifts. And a lot of time, a wake-up call can be something that's very traumatic. It's disguised a certain way. A couple of the wake-up calls that I've had for myself over the past 10 years, I call these my spiritual awakenings. One was my divorce in 2018. That was a really, really huge wake-up call for me, where it gave me the opportunity to really audit myself, my life, my habits, where I was at. Another one was the death of my mom in 2021. And so these wake up calls, I really consider them blessings, because a lot of times they only come a couple times in one person's life. And so when they do come, a lot of times they're going to be disguised as pain, and they are going to be inexperienced, and you're going to be feeling certain things. But they are also an opportunity to kind of reset sail and really audit and evaluate yourself. Well, let's go ahead and kind of just get started here. I wanted to start off why comfort feels safe. And comfort feels safe, and that's why it's expensive. Comfort rarely looks like a bad decision when you're making it. That's what makes it so sneaky. Saying things like, I'll do it later, avoiding uncertainty, choosing familiar over beneficial. Humans, the way that we're wired, are for immediate ease. Comfort gives temporary relief with zero immediate pain. But there are going to be hidden costs. And I know that you've experienced some of these as well: delayed progress, delayed results, delayed confidence. Comfort is like interest in procrastination. The longer you carry it, the more it costs. When I was an adolescent growing up, junior high years, high school years, there always seemed to be those kids that just carried themselves a certain way and they appeared very confident. And I used to think that confidence was something that you were really born with. Either you were born with it and you had it and it was just kind of natural, or you didn't. And only, in the decades and years that have followed, have I realized that confidence it's a skill. It's something that you have to earn every day. It's making the promises to yourself. It's having that desire to be better, to grow, to want to get out of your comfort zone. And that's always been a big talking point to my kids. if your dreams aren't big enough, if your goals aren't big enough to where they actually scare you and intimidate you and, really, like, kinda frighten you, then they're probably not big enough.
Yeah.
And we're probably not living a big enough life unless some of this stuff that we wanna do is really pretty intimidating.
I mean, we might get into this a little bit later on the episode, but I like the idea too of like a zero options mentality, or like Tony Robbins likes to use the phrase burn the boats, meaning that,
Yeah.
when people get comfortable, you have an out, you have an excuse, you have a reason to not do whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Where if you force yourself into scenarios where you don't have an option and it's this or nothing, you have to move forward. You have to do whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. I think that's a great strategy for a lot of people.
Mhm.
If you are somebody that just gets into this comfort zone all the time, a way to kind of force yourself out of it by just creating these environments around you where you don't have an option, whether
Yeah.
that be, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, just as an example, like maybe you're striving for a new job, but you're still spending all of your time at your current job that you hate, and you don't have the energy and the ability to pursue something else until you just
Mhm.
one day say, you know what, I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to give this new venture 100% of my time and effort. And then you're out of your comfort zone, and then you're forced with zero other options out there.
Mm. Yeah. That's so great.
Let's talk too about, I think, this concept of just how every comfortable choice has a receipt
Okay.
attached to it.
I
Because
like
the
that.
hard part about a lot of the comfort is, the receipt sometimes just doesn't print right away. So examples of this would be, like, for example, skipping workouts. Maybe you have a list of 5 people you're supposed to call every day, and you're skipping those on a regular basis, or you're avoiding certain opportunities, some of those hard conversations. In the moment, it feels pretty harmless, no big deal. Yeah, I slept in this morning, I skipped the workout, but over years, what does that account to?
Mhm.
Skipping one day a week of workouts, in a year, that's over 50 workouts. Over, a few years, that's hundreds. So just thinking about just the long-term effects that you're not going to notice immediately, but they do still have an impact on just your long-term goals and your long-term success. So, whether that be health, income, relationships. And I think you made a comment a minute ago too about, like, in high school, just people that are born with confidence. I think that confidence oftentimes comes from taking action and stepping out of the comfort zone when you really don't want to. It's like proving to yourself that you're bigger than that. And that's, I think, where a lot of this confidence comes from rather than being born with it.
That's right. It's a false conception, thinking that folks are born with confidence, and maybe some people display that better on the outside. Um, but it's not something that you can, I mean, I suppose you can kind of fake it, but even if you're faking it, it doesn't mean that you really have it. Kind of to your point a minute ago, with this thought process that you're talking about, how I like to describe this and the way that I think of it is easy days, hard life,
Mm,
hard days, easy life. And so kind of I love that point about the receipts where a lot of times the receipts don't show up if you miss the workout or you don't go to the gym, you don't get up on time, or maybe you don't go to bed on time. You don't do the things that you're supposed to be doing. Well, what are the consequences? A lot of times in the moment, you're not really even going to notice the consequences, but it's that compounding over time. And so for the folks that live very easy days, a lot of times they have a hard life. That might,
definitely.
if you're living easy days, you're probably not strict with your diet, or maybe you're not going to the gym or you're not taking care of yourself. Um, Maybe you're not developing your skills the way that you should, and your career is not as fulfilling as what you had hoped for. So you're living easy, but your days are very hard. Your life is very hard. On the opposite, somebody that lives their days very hard, meaning they are disciplined, they are working out, they're committed, they're following through with what they say, they're developing themselves as a parent, as a person, as a leader. They're growing their skills, they're becoming more valuable in the marketplace. Those are not easy days, but their life is very easy because they're going to have options. A lot of times they're going to have financial security. They're going to have better options when it comes to finding a mate. So that's one thing that, and from looking, looking at others and the way that they live lives, you can start to identify whose days are easy and whose days are hard.
Love that, man. That's really good. Yeah, I think, it's something that, like, I mean, we just not to, broken record here, but it's just something that you don't see necessarily. It's this just trust in yourself, trust in others. You look at every single successful, whether it be entrepreneur or just, in athletics, anything really.
Yeah.
The one thing they all have in common is they're really good at the simple, basic things, but the kicker is consistently.
Yeah.
Andy
Yes.
Frisella, one of my favorite entrepreneurs, always talks about just win the day. It doesn't matter. Anything outside of that doesn't matter. Just win today and then win tomorrow. And you're gonna have a few L's in there too. You're not gonna win every single day, but it's just understanding that it's these daily, more finite type actions you're taking that you're not gonna notice change immediately. Maybe not even after a week or a month, but that's what it takes, and that's what every single successful person all has in common is they understand that concept.
Yeah, and when you live like that, eventually, kind of to your point, what you're describing, it transforms you into a strong, powerful, resilient person when you
Hmm.
live your days very hard. And I think one of the reasons that people avoid comfort is that it can be fear in disguise. A lot of what we call comfort is really just fear wearing nicer clothes, not applying for the job, not investing, not posting content, not buying your first property or your first investment property, not having that tough conversation. People will say things like, I'm waiting, I'm thinking, I'm not sure yet, I'm going to wait for better timing. But the reality is that it's often a fear of rejection or a fear of failure or a fear of judgment. Comfort becomes socially acceptable avoidance. Most people aren't stuck because they need more time. They're stuck because comfort has become their hiding place. I start, one of the things that I reflect back on is when I just started posting daily content, when I started sharing my reels, making videos of myself and putting those out there for everyone to see. I had to overcome some fear with that. What are people going to think? They're going to notice that my posting tendencies have changed. They're going to, am I going to turn people off? And am I going to lose connections or friends? And I know that I have because of that. But at the same time, it's like I want to grow my influence. I want to grow my skills as someone on social media, on different platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And I want to be able to feel like I'm building towards something. And it is very uncomfortable initially, but then once you overcome that fear, all of a sudden you realize, this isn't that big of a deal. And now I'm posting content like 8, 9, 10 times a day, which is crazy to say because 6 months ago I was posting like, 8 or 9 times a month.
You're a hustler, baby. Let's just kind of talk about a couple other things before we wrap this one up. Just I'd like to connect this to real estate a little bit since I know a lot of our audience is whether it be in real estate as far as in the industry or maybe they're aspiring homeowners. For that one specifically, anybody that's an aspiring home buyer, comfortable also can apply to this. Comfortable waiting can cost buyers. We see this in real estate all the time where buyers, are choosing comfort now and paying for it later. Right now, especially with the way that the economy is, affordability, interest rates are a bit higher. A lot of people are on the sidelines, waiting because rates are uncomfortable, waiting because this uncertainty in the economy is uncomfortable, waiting because this decision just maybe feels overwhelming to them.
Hmm.
But the longer they wait and just stay on the sidelines and are just comfortable, they're going to see that these prices are going up, rents increasing, they're delaying building up equity, they're losing out on opportunities.
Yeah.
It's not really fear mongering. It's just straight up just math. It's honestly here. It's just reality. It's time out of the market has a cost associated with it. So even just being a comfortable decision, sometimes that's important to do. Everybody has their own scenario, and when it makes the most sense to buy a home, that's obviously a very personal type decision. But the comfortable decision is often to wait, and that's oftentimes also when that wealth building decision is, to move before you really feel comfortable, and that's what it takes. Oftentimes, is to step out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, I just love that comment that you made earlier about collecting receipts when it comes to comfort and making those tough decisions, buying that first investment property, buying that first home. You know who gets to collect the receipt or the benefit of that? The old you or the future you. And the things that you do in the present, the future you is going to thank you. And if you're in a good spot right now, maybe you've made some of those decisions in the past. The younger you is the person to thank. And by delaying some of those important things when it comes to real estate, you had mentioned investing, saving. Again, you're probably not going to notice it tomorrow or the next day, but you know who is going to notice it? The version of you 10 years from now, or the version of you who is wanting to send their kids to college, and you either have an additional $500,000 in equity in your home or you don't, or you've done that retirement planning or you haven't.
Yeah. Very, very important.
So, well, yeah, let's move on to part 5 here. Growth and comfort cannot occupy the same space. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Growth and comfort do not live in the same room. Isn't that true?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I want to be around people that are growing, people that have goals. I always, when I get frustrated with myself, just kind of like looking back over the last 10 or 15 years, it's usually at times when I feel like I'm not growing. I feel complacent. I get too comfortable. So growth and comfort cannot be in the same room. Every breakthrough starts with discomfort, awkwardness, uncertainty. New routines feel hard. New standards feel unnatural. But discomfort is proof of expansion. Comfort equals sameness. Discomfort equals growth. If it feels uncomfortable, that usually means something is changing. And just think about some of the new habits that you've taken up over the last 20 years. Maybe you're someone that just started working out, or maybe you're running and you're doing this new athletic activity. And this is one of the reasons I say it's so difficult for people who are out of shape to get into shape. It's not that it's impossible, it's that it's so uncomfortable and it's so difficult just to develop that new habit. And a lot of people make the mistake, they get way too aggressive too fast, and it's very, very difficult. A friend of mine, she's probably 40 or 50 pounds overweight, and she wants to, get more active, start running, really build exercise into her health routine. But she got a little bit too aggressive where she just started wanting to do like a mile or 2 miles a day. And when you're out of shape, when you're overweight, when you haven't developed that memory muscle as far as just doing the habit, and then you don't have the physical muscles, it's very, very challenging. I mean, have you ever tried to go run a mile like out of shape?
Well, it's insane.
I
And I'm speaking from personal experience on that note.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been there. The analogy that I use for myself is I did a half marathon probably like 15 years ago, and I didn't train for it at all. I just showed up on a Sunday morning and went and ran the half marathon, and it was absolutely brutal for me. At the end of the race, this is how bad I did. At the end of the race, there was this kid who was probably like 7 years old who like sprinted past me, and I was like, okay, that's a first. Like a 7-year-old just beat me in a half marathon. That tells you how slow I was going. And then right before I crossed the finish line, I kid you not, a guy with one leg passed me.
Well, I bet you didn't have any cramps in that leg, so he was
and,
probably
and so
just
my analogy is it was a really miserable experience because I hadn't trained at all. And so that's why um, it's so important to kind of build those new routines. But even if you start small and you build out the routines, you're still growing, you're still making progress. And kind of to your point, you want to be able to stack that progress day after day after day. Just try and win the day. You're not going
Mhm.
to win every day in the week, but go win 5 days out of the week and do that for a period of a year and then see where you're at.
Yep. That's where you see the most growth is just these little small actions on a repeated, consistent basis. I think the last point I'd like to share is just kind of an internal idea for anybody listening that's really, feeling motivated from what we're talking about. And that's just to ask better daily questions, just really
Yeah.
feeding your mind the appropriate, correct, just input into your brain just to help with this. So, start with just kind of not necessarily a script, but just having some of this in the back of your mind and starting to just be very intentional about changing your thought process and how you say
Yeah.
some of this stuff. So instead of asking, what feels easiest today, start asking, what would the future me thank me for? Um, Kind of like a daily filter you can do with this is, what again, just very introspective, looking at yourself here, look at yourself in the mirror. What actions am I avoiding today? What
Hmm.
conversations need to happen? What would maybe, really create growth and do whatever it is that you're avoiding on those, Brian Tracy is an author that wrote a book, Eat That Frog. And that's the whole premise of his book is start with the toughest things first, whatever
Yeah.
you're really avoiding and you feel probably the most comfortable in, do that first. Push yourself, get that out of the way early in the morning when you have the most energy and the highest level of motivation. Really build up that tolerance for the discomfort because those small, reps that you're doing over a long, consistent period of time is what you're going to really need in order to see growth.
And you know what happens when you eat the frog first thing in the morning? It exhilarates you. It's exhilarating to go get to, to say, I went and did this, even though I didn't want to go do it. I mean, I'll face it. A lot of my runs, I don't necessarily want to go do. But
Well, I'm
then when I
sure.
get back from the run, I'm like, you know what? That is just so empowering. Same with going to the gym. There are a lot of mornings where I'm not really wanting to get up early and go to the gym, but every single time at 7 a.m., I'm like, you know what? I'm so glad that I did that this morning.
Well, for sure, man. I can even just notice a difference on my weekdays versus my weekends. You normally would think weekends you're in a little bit better of a mood, since you're not maybe working, depending on what kind of job people have out there. But for me, since I don't go to the gym with you on the weekends, I just have a mental shift where I'm just not even in the same headspace oftentimes, just because I don't have that eat that frog. I didn't do that
Yeah.
task first thing in the morning.
Yeah, it's a great way to start your day and very empowering. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Comfort is not free. It just changes you later in your income, in your health, in your missed opportunities, in your regret. So this week, I want you to ask yourself, where in my life have I gotten too comfortable? My career? Is it my relationships with my kids? Because that answer usually points directly at where your next breakthrough lives. We'll see you guys next week on the Pursuit of Progress podcast. I'm Ben Adams for Adam Lang. We'll see you guys next week.
Catch you guys next time.